Hi, I'm Adam. I'm married with two sons, John and Matthew. John is 10 and Matthew is 8, and they both have additional needs. John has cerebral palsy and Matthew is autistic. In my spare time, I like being outdoors, either walking, riding my bike, or taking photographs. While I was growing up, both my parents always worked really hard, and this instilled a strong work ethic in me. I've always had an affinity with computers, and this developed into a career maintaining ICT networks. I was promoted about 2 months before John was born. Everything was going well, and we had a baby on the way. When John was born, it was a difficult birth, and during our time in hospital, we were taken into a separate room to be told that he would be moderately to severely disabled and require support for the rest of his life. We didn't get a diagnosis of cerebral palsy till months later when we saw it written on a letter from the hospital. While John was young, I had to go to work, leaving my wife to get 3 buses to get John to physio and various other appointments. It was difficult for me leaving her behind, knowing how much she would struggle. And life only got harder with the arrival of our second son Matthew, which meant I had to leave my wife with 2 children at home, and I knew she was struggling even more. I continued to work for a while, but it was getting harder and harder trying to balance my home life with my work life. I was diagnosed with depression and signed off from work. Getting that diagnosis hit me pretty hard. I didn't understand depression and thought it was an excuse people used to get out of work. I really struggled coming to terms with it and to get back on track. I tried to go back to work, but I had to reduce my hours. This left us struggling financially as well as emotionally. I tried to increase my hours at work again to try and provide more for my family, but I was still struggling with depression, so this didn't work out. I was eventually laid off from my job, and this put me into the benefit system. I couldn't go back to work and became a full-time carer for my son. I struggled with being on benefits, as I had always been brought up with a strong work ethic to provide for myself and my family. Now we were living hand to mouth, and it felt like I was relying on handouts to survive and was a burden on society. This was truly humbling, as I used to think people on benefits were lazy or scroungers, but now I was experiencing it from the other side. Poverty and depression are a downward spiral that's very difficult to pull yourself out of. When you're depressed, it's difficult to make the phone calls and fill in the forms you need to survive on benefits or get a job. You have to give the same information so many times to every organisation. We were struggling to provide good meals for the family, and basics like shoes and clothes were difficult to replace when they wore out. I felt like I was failing to provide a safe and secure home for my family. We had to move out of our house because the landlord decided to sell it, and despite having medical and homeless priority, the council couldn't find us a suitable home. I felt like the system I'd been paying into my whole life was letting me down. Eventually we found another house and a great landlord without any help from social services. Despite being more settled, we still struggled financially. We felt trapped in a system that didn't give you enough to survive. We were juggling bills and ended up more and more in debt just to get by. We had social workers involved, but we seemed to have a new one every few months, and despite them trying to help us, the system wouldn't allow them to. They managed to get us 2 nights a month respite, but this wasn't enough, and now we pay for additional nights ourselves. The only way we've managed to lift ourselves out of this situation was due to our son's difficult birth, resulting in a medical negligence case that has begun to pay out. This extra money has finally got us just about back in the black. Without this, I would still be struggling with day-to-day life and supporting my family. Most people don't have this chance and will be stuck in the system indefinitely. Things that could have helped would have been better information sharing between departments so that we didn't have to be re-traumatized by repeatedly telling the same story to everyone we see. Multidisciplinary teams didn't seem to work for us. They didn't feel like they were linking up the things that were important to us, and each department seemed to push their own opinion and follow their own agenda. The housing department need a better understanding of people's needs. They offered us a house with stairs to the front door, which is no good for someone who uses a wheelchair. The only positive experience we had was from a private landlord who listened to us, understood our needs, and adapted a house for us to rent. Social services need to be more forthcoming with information. It feels like they play their cards very close to their chests and you have to ask repeatedly for things you are entitled to. Respite is never enough. Breaks need to feel like they are long enough to be of benefit. In September of last year, I joined the Poverty Truth Commission because I believed in what they were doing and felt like I had a unique story to tell. I want to bring these issues into the open and try to change them.